Hey, what's up, Hotep, you guys? Welcome back to the Chosen Few channel. As always, I'm your host, Matthew Daniels, the writer, author, scribe, and bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm, world. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory, family, your memory never die. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about the poor Southern whites during slavery. The poor Southern whites during slavery. Now, you may not have ever contemplated such a topic before, and admittedly, directly, I've never contemplated studying it. But at one trip to the library, I came across this book right here, W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction in America from 1860 to 1880. This is the book that we're going to be talking about. Now, as you see, this is a massive volume, and it's chock full of information and data about the Reconstruction period in America. But he's also talking about the ends of slavery as well. That's why he says from 1860 to 1880. And so it was while reading through this book that I came across something that W.E.B. Du Bois said on the subject of the poor Southern white during slavery. And I thought it would be interesting to share that with you guys. All right. So before we get into that, the section of the book when he talks about the poor Southern white during slavery, he also talks about the Northern white, and so I think it would be beneficial to briefly speak on that history as well, just so you guys can fully understand what's going on here. In the North, he talked about a labor class that turned into a race wide. To sum it up, basically, millions of migrants were coming from overseas to America. Now, these immigrants that were coming from overseas to America in the early mid 1800s, this is the time period he's talking about, they had begun to get angry because they felt like they couldn't compete with slave labor. How could they compete for a job when there was somebody who had slaves who could actually work the job for free so they could get it for a real cheap price? You have to understand, during slavery, everybody didn't just work on the plantation. A lot of people were like leased out. Let's say I was a business owner, right? I didn't own any slaves, but I could go to somebody with a plantation and say, hey, I want to rent out this person or this person and this person for the year. We would agree to a price, and then that slave would come and work for me for that agreed upon price. Now, if it was an immigrant worker, someone who was white, an immigrant worker that came to America, and they tried to get that job for me as a business owner, I couldn't pay them slave wages, right? I couldn't pay them slave wages, and so they felt like they couldn't compete. And this actually, as crazy as it sounds, this turned into race riots. They blamed the black people for it, and they began to attack black people. Check out what he says about it. The foreigners, no less, the foreigners in turn blamed blacks for the cheap price of labor. The result was race war. Riots took place, which were at first simply the flaming hostility of groups of laborers fighting for bread and butter. Then they turned into race riots. For 3 days in Cincinnati in 1829, a mob of whites wounded and killed free Negroes and fugitive slaves and destroyed property. This is 1829, in the middle of slavery. You have problems with wages and labor, so you start attacking the lowest class citizen in America. Make it make sense, family. Make it make sense. But you talking about riots now, burning down property, tearing up buildings and homes and stuff. Where do you think we learned this from? Right? That didn't start with Black Lives Matter. They didn't create that like riots is as old as time. Riots been going on right here in America. Look what it say, family. And this don't even make any sense. In Philadelphia, in Philadelphia, from 1828 to 1840, a series of riots took place, which thereafter extended until after the Civil War. The riot of 1834 took the dimensions of a pitched battle and lasted for 3 days. 31 houses and 2 churches were destroyed. Other riots took place in 1835 and 1838, and 2 days riot in 1842 caused the calling out of the militia with artillery. Riots on and popping. You mad at labor. You're mad with the labor situation, so you lash out at the lowest citizen on the totem pole. That don't make no sense, family. So basically, W.E.B. Du Bois, he mentions that talking about the state of the white worker, right? And so then he goes into the white worker in the southern states. They had it different than the whites in the north. Remember, the poor southern whites during slavery. So I'm going to read what he says about said subject so you can see it for yourself. And we'll probably talk about some of it. Look at this, family. He says, in all this consideration, we have so far ignored the white workers of the South, and we have done this because the labor movement ignored them, and the abolitionists ignored them. And above all, they were ignored by Northern capitalists and Southern planters. They were in many respects almost a forgotten mass of men. Carnes describes the slave South, the period just before the war. So this is a man about to describe the period just before the war, right? It resolves itself into three classes, broadly distinguished from each other and connected by no common interest. So he's talking about, he's going to break it down into three different classes. The slaves, on whom devolves all the regular industry, the slave holders who reap all its fruits, and an idle and lawless rabble who live dispersed over vast plains in a condition little removed from absolute barbarity. He's talking about white people, right? He says, and an idle and lawless rabble who live dispersed over vast plains in a condition little removed from absolute barbarism. Poor southern whites during slavery living in conditions little removed from absolute barbarism. From all that has been written and said about the antebellum South, one almost loses sight of about 5 million white people in 1860 who lived in the South and held no slaves. 5 million people. Even among the 2 million slaveholders, an oligarchy of 8,000 really ruled the South. So what he's basically breaking down is, a lot of times when we think about slavery, we think about, blacks being on the bottom, white people running plantations and owning slaves, but everybody didn't own slaves. He said in the Southern South itself, there was about 5 million white people who did not own any slaves. And then he say out of the 2 million that did own slaves, there was only about 8,000 that owned like large amounts, and that was actually running things in the South. It was like 8,000 that controlled a lot of it and ran a lot of it. The other ones that made up the full 2 million, they may have 3, 2, 1. You know what I'm saying? They may have been a slave trader trading in slaves, something like that. But he said that there was 5 million that didn't even have any slaves, and we're going to look at the conditions that they were living in. Right? He says, for 20 years, I do not recollect ever to have seen or heard these non-slaveholding whites referred to by the Southern gentlemen as constituting any part of what they called the South. They were largely ignorant and degraded. Only 25% could read and write. Think about that, family. Now, we know the slave couldn't read and write, but the poor southern whites during slavery, only 25% could read and write, family. Did you know that? The condition of the poor whites has been many times described. Look at how the condition was many times described, according to the ancestor, W.E.B. Du Bois. A wretched log hut or two are the only habitations in sight. Here reside, or rather take shelter, the miserable cultivators of the ground, or a still more destitute class who make a precarious living by peddling lightwood in the city. So they living in wretched log huts, just like the slave cabins. These cabins are dens of filth. These cabins are dens of filth. The bed, if there be a bed, is a layer of something in the corner that defies scenting. You can't scent it. You can't get it to smell good. It smells bad no matter what you put on it or what you do to it. If the bed is nasty, what of the floor? What of the whole enclosed space? What of the creatures themselves? Pog. Water in use as a purifier is unknown. Water in use as a purifier is unknown. Their faces are debarred with the muddy accumulation of weeks. They just give them a wipe when they see a stranger to take off the blackest dirt. The poor wretched seem startled when you address them and answer your questions cowering like culprits. Olmsted said, I saw as much close packing, filth, and squalor in certain blocks inhabited by laboring whites in Charleston as I have witnessed in any northern town of its size, and greater evidences of brutality and ruffianly character than I have ever happened to see among an equal population of this class before. And speaking of them again, he says most of them are illiterate and more than correspondingly ignorant. Some of them had Indian ancestry, and a few bear evidences of Negro blood. He says the irregularities of their moral lives cause them no sense of shame. But notwithstanding these low moral conceptions, they are of an intense religious excitability. So what y'all have to understand is that the era of slavery was horrible all the way around, right? Horrible all the way around, except for the ones on top. Except for the capitalists on top. It was horrible all the way around. And it was extremely more horrible for my ancestors because you see, nobody wanted to trade places. They just wanted to blame and punish. But the poor Southern whites during slavery lived in wretched conditions, pretty much the same conditions as the slave without being a slave. And the only thing that they offered them or gave them was, hey, at least you're not a Negro. At least you're not a slave. At least you're not black. I want y'all to think about something. When you watch those movies, right? Slave movies, you always see, you'll see the person that run a plantation. They look rich. Their family look rich, but there'll always be whites around that look poor, wearing overalls and things like that. They look poor. It was millions of them, family, millions of them. So we have to understand that the institution of slavery, it affected a lot of people, and it had to come to an end. It had to come to an end. But I hope I told y'all guys something that y'all ain't never heard before. Poor Southern whites during slavery. Look, I want y'all to, if y'all want to support the channel, look, like, share, subscribe. I'm trying to build a channel. Let's get them subs up. Like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support, remember, I am an author. That's why I'm the Real Bookworm, fam. Click the link in the description. You can read the synopsis to all of my books on that website. It's my wife's website called dandyandbigherm.com. Just go to it, read the synopsis. I have the greatest love story ever written, all written by the Scribe Matthew Daniels, my beautiful and loving wife. Books $20, no shipping. $20, no shipping. Big Game Hunting by Matthew Daniels. Check this out. I'm the Real Bookworm for a reason, family. Go read that synopsis, man. Go read that synopsis. Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels. $20, no shipping, family. Just click that link. Suicide Note by Matthew Daniels. These are two hard-hitting urban fiction novels. If y'all into that gangster stuff, if y'all into that hood stuff, if y'all into that urban literature, this is two of the best, man. I'm telling you, read these. This is two of the best. This is two of the best. You into that investigative reporting, exposing decades of corruption right here where I live, man. Y'all click that link, support that, man. I hope y'all like the video. Poor Southern whites during slavery. This your brother Matthew Daniels, a.k.a. I'm Pooh, a.k.a. The Chosen Few, a.k.a. The Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, world. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel.